Hello, please allow us to welcome you. My name is Jay Shorr, along with my business partner and daughter, Mara Shorr, our national practice management consultants dealing with the operational, administrative, and financial health and guidance of medical practices in multiple specialties. Today, our presentation is going to be about working with both millennials and baby boomers. Mara, give a shout out so everybody can see you and say hello.
Yes, hello. So you'll see us going back and forth between the two of us. Thank you so much for joining us today. We know, as you can see, like Jay said, father daughter business partners. And as you can see, we know about working with millennials and baby boomers in the same office. And we know about working with millennials and baby boomers in the same practice. We work with practices just like yours across the country. So here we go. We are really, really excited to speak with you today.
I guess it's no secret which one's the millennial and which one's the baby boomer. So, as we progress and as we try to explain what medicine really is, in our world, medicine is a science. It's biology, it's anatomy, it's physiology, it's in the oral maxillofacial space, in the aesthetic cosmetic plastic surgery world, in the dermatologic world, in the internal medicine family practice world, where a lot of people are converting to aesthetic cosmetic medicine. The one thing you have to recall is it's always still a science. And medicine is a way to heal the sick and injured, primary care, cardiology, internal medicine. But in the aesthetic cosmetic world, in the oral maxillofacial non reconstructive world, it's a way to keep our patients looking young and beautiful. Whether it's implantology, whether it's veneers and cosmetic ways. And it's still one of the most respected professions today, I think, because of title and mainly because of education. You have to go through 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school. You may do an internship, a residency. You may go to dental school. In our world here in the oral maxillofacial, the creme de la creme, you go into the dental school and then you go into oral maxillofacial, the tops in the field. But I want you to understand one thing about medicine in the world we live in, and that is front and foremost, as well as taking care of our patients' medicine, is a business.
Exactly. And it's so easy that people think, oh, it's a you have a dental practice, you have a surgical practice, you have a medical practice. And I think that Jay, so often that word practice kind of messes people up a little bit in that thinking of this is a business. We want to make sure that you're treating your practice like a business because that's exactly what it is, Jay, just like you said.
We have to go through financial constraints. We have to go through dealing with the most important resource in our business. And the most important resource are human resources.
Mm-hmm.
And they can be the patient and they can be our staff, whether it's the millennial or the baby boomer. But before we go on, I do want to kick it off to explain what our top priorities are in any field of medicine that we deal with. Number one, those of you who may know me in this field will know me as Jay, the safety guy. All right. And front and foremost, safety of the patient and safety of our staff is by far the number one priority, followed by protection of our providers' licenses. At any stage that you have a license, we must protect it at all costs, but safety of our patient and safety of our staff is always number one. Thirdly, have fun. And lastly, let's make some money. All right. Because once again, medicine is a business.
Exactly, exactly. And that's something that we always want to make sure we're keeping in mind. So, for today, the topic that we're really going to be focusing on is looking at working with millennials and baby boomers in the same business, in the same practice. And I'm going to talk a little bit about when we talk about a millennial, what we're speaking of. Jay is going to talk a little bit about the baby boomer and who we're speaking of. And one thing that I want to make sure that one thing I want to make sure everybody understands is that there are some things that are very tried and true and specific, i.e., when we talk about millennials, that it is generally agreed upon that the age we're looking at is 1980 to 1995, right? So that is the generation of the millennial. Above that, there is some talk of a zennial, which is the difference, a micro generation between generation millennials and Generation X. And Gen X is that generation between millennial and baby boomer. Now, the reason that we're not talking about Gen X for the sake of today is that they do tend to blend some of the similarities between baby boomer and the similarities between millennial, but there is a very stark contrast between millennials and baby boomers, as I am certain you have seen in your practice. So, what again I want to specify though is that when we talk about some of the traits, when we talk about some of the issues that are coming up in practices or that are very generation specific, this is not necessarily tried and true for every single person in that generation. There's always going to be caveats. And so we want to make sure that we're talking about generalities here. We're not talking about this goes for every single person in that generation. So millennials, as you can see on your screen, this is 1980 to 1995. That is the generation that we're talking about. The 96 and on has been known as Generation Z. And I'm incredibly curious, although the generation after Generation Z has not been named yet. I have a feeling we're going to see a generation of COVID kids, honestly. So I think that one's to come. But the reason we're not talking about Gen Z.
No, we start off like an Excel spreadsheet. They're AA.
Oh, there we go. The reason we're not talking about Gen Z is that they haven't hit the workforce yet with enough strength to see their traits in the post-college workforce yet. So millennials are known so often as Generation Social Media. This is the generation that grew up with technology at their fingertips. So I'm in that in-between generation between millennials and Gen X. So I say sometimes they, sometimes we, I'm right in between. But this is a generation that was grown up with social media. It came out either high school, college, right after college, and technology has been at the fingertips of millennials for quite some time. So that's really shaped how they think of different concepts, different things, which is what we're going to get into. Now, Jay and I joke all the time. Millennials are here to stay, right? And there's a specific reason that I say this. So this is a generation that has truly changed the workforce. Every generation has put its mark on the workforce in a different way. But when we look at millennials, it's the technology that has driven and is their greatest claim to fame. Now, when I say that they're here to stay, it's that because at one point, Jay and I used to talk, and he would, as many baby boomers do, it's the grumble of millennials, millennials, millennials. And Jay would say, well, I guess we'll just have to, they're here to stay. And I said, well, of course they're here to stay. Did you think an entire generation was just going to be wiped off the face of the planet? So of course the baby boomer generation has had comments, as had Gen X, but the millennial generation is here to stay. And it's really looking at how the two generations are going to work together in the workforce. So Jay, why don't you give some notes on the more stereotypical, but also some of the facts that we know about baby boomer generation? I have a feeling you know about this generation.
Well, that's the generation that I come from. Right there, you can see my friends over to the left. They're really not my friends. It was just a great picture that we found that represents that generation. And they are, kind of the Vietnam era, the civil rights era, as you can see, the 46 to 64. It was a great time. It was a very tumultuous time. We grew up at the start, and I mean the start of technology. And don't laugh, but DOS really was technology. Okay. The flip phone really
Sorry,
was.
Jay. I know you said don't laugh, but
It was technology. And, although like anything else, I grew up with putting the first man on the moon. And, we started out, we have a different way of thinking. All right. Our generation was a counterculture. It was one of thought and forethought, but of course, the Gen X, the Gen Z, the millennial have a much better thought process because what they have at their exposure is nothing like we had. All right. So we think differently. We buy differently. We didn't buy online. We didn't have an online to buy. So we had to do a lot more investigation. We have to ask a lot more questions. And we didn't have, I think, as much money at our exposure as they do today. There wasn't as much expendable income as there is today. And there really was more loyalty in the workplace. Now, I'm going to say there was more loyalty in the workplace from both sides. It
Mhm.
wasn't that people say, oh, these millennials today, you can't count on them. They jump from ship to ship. But you know what? I recall in the years and years ago when companies used to give the gold watch and used to have 25, 30, 40 years that a company would keep their employee. Companies are not as loyal to their staff anymore. Hence, staff is not as loyal to their company anymore because it really is a bilateral agreement.
Mhm.
Plus, opportunity really does exist today more now than ever. Because, Mara and I have this old favorite expression that when you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. And therefore, it is that practice that still fills teeth with mercury. And I only make that as a joke. All right. I'm not really serious. But think about those practices that did things the same way all the time and didn't change. And then when new practices came in, technology came in, and there were people like myself proud to say that embraced all the new change. I got rid of the flip phone and I went to a QWERTY. All right. I mean, I thought I was hot when I had the BlackBerry. All right. And then it went to the next and the next. So, um, as we are able to embrace technology from DOS to Windows 3.0, from AOL to a different thing, we become more technological. The baby boomer and then the millennial becomes more technological when we have EMRs in the workplace. But our thought process today, my age group, as Mara and I work with multiple stages of arrest in the practice, we work with brand new practices coming out of residencies and fellowships or surgeons working for somebody that want to open up their own practice. Then we work with practices that are in the intra stage of success, wanting to become more successful.
Mhm.
And then we work with people like myself who are worrying and wondering about succession planning and exit strategies, hopefully voluntary versus involuntary. And involuntary, I mean forced retirement, disability, premature demise.
And that brings up a great point about this is a generation, Jay, the baby boomer generation, your generation, that is in the workplace now, but might not necessarily be 10 years from now, for example. Maybe not, depending on the age of the baby boomer and the interest in retirement. So I think that this is an issue we have for maybe I would say the next 5, 10 years, but there's always going to be multiple generations within a workplace.
And the beauty about having millennials and um, baby boomers kind of in the same practices because people like me who are thinking about their exit strategy. I mean, I laugh all the time. I already have my exit strategy planned. I'm 66 years old, and my exit strategy is the young woman that is on the other side of the screen because we are father daughter. But maybe if I had had a business colleague or associate that joined me and I was thinking about an exit strategy, I might say to Mara, if she were not my daughter, would you think about considering buying my business as I'm going to exit? I want to sell 10, 20, 30, 40, and then 60% where you will take it over and then eventually buy me out, whether it's in sweat equity or whether it's in cash. But since we are father-daughter, we have our exit strategy already in place. And maybe some of you may have a son, a daughter, somebody else, a brother, a sister, who may want to take over your business as you exit. And I already told Mara, I am willing to sell my practice to her for $1 and I will finance it.
So I think that as we look at all of the different items surrounding working with millennials and baby boomers, it's something to consider is that you might have a built-in exit strategy within that. So I think that's always something to think about is that could the millennial working in your practice, could the Gen Xer working in your practice be your exit strategies? This isn't the first time that multiple generations have worked together within a practice. It's just a matter of looking at how can multiple generations work together in a practice. So one of the things that we want to start off talking about, and there's going to be a number of different components that we speak about today, are hierarchy. So this is one of the top issues I hear about again and again when it comes to different generations working in the same practice, is that baby boomers value hierarchy in a practice. When I say that, I mean that the boss is the boss. The owner is the boss. You refer to them as Dr. So-and-so, or if that person has a spouse that works in the practice, do you call them by their first name? You respect their authority, and what they say goes, we don't question it. And that tends to be a much more baby boomer mentality. I'm not saying which is right and which is wrong, but millennials tend to see people on a much more level playing field. And so there tends to be a lot more questioning of authority. We see this in current events. We see this in workforce. And so there is a lot more questioning. Now, social media has somewhat to do with this, is that through social media, everybody is on a level playing field. That people see influencers, people see celebrities, and they have just as much access to them on social media as they do their aunt or their neighbor next door whose dog has an Instagram account. So everybody tends to be on a level playing field. And this is a generation that was taught to question things. That's what Google was founded on. Google was founded on, we have questions and we want answers, and we want answers now. And so we see again and again the frustration that arises when it comes to the questioning of the hierarchy and that shift in hierarchy. Jay, what have you found as far as some of the issues that have arisen, even within some of our clients?
Coming through when I was young, and they had the people who are no longer here, all right, who were my bosses, they're 90, 100 years old.
The silent generation.
Yeah, it was just a respect. It was all Mr. So-and-so. We never really called our bosses, but what I've noticed is because of the accessibility of information out there today, it does put us all on that level playing field. I still have that respect when I meet somebody that is even much younger than myself, that are doctors and surgeons, out of due respect, not necessarily because of MD, DO, DMD, DDS, or whatever titles you have, PhD after your MD, DDS. It's a respect for you as that professional. And I'm a professional as well with a higher level of education. However, I do know that there are certain people that get offended that are doctors and physicians and surgeons when they are addressed in the very beginning by their first names. So as a baby boomer, I still refer to people that I meet that are doctors as doctor, in whatever specialty that you are in. And even then, and only when that doctor, he or she, insists that I call them by their first name, do I do that. Because when somebody calls me Mr. Shorr, I just think of my dad, all right? And people look at me now and say, "What, you are the dad," all right? I said, "Yeah, please call me Jay." So I understand it. We have a different level of respect for one another. But really, it's only a personal feeling. It really isn't. I truly believe that everyone should be on a level playing field. We should treat equally one another by gender, by age, by sexual orientation, by political preference. It really doesn't matter. All right. And especially in our patient base and especially in our employee base.
And we'll get into a few ways to nip this right from the start in a few slides. So we're going to address this. We just wanted to address it as one of the issues. But one of the things that we definitely wanted to talk about was that there seems to definitely be a frustration when it comes to this hierarchy difference. So the other difference, another major difference that we see that Jay and I had started alluding to a few minutes ago was differences in comfort levels with technology. Now, again, I'm going to preface this that this is a generality. This is not everybody, that has this issue in every generation. But what we have found is that often baby boomers, they're slower to learn technology, but they don't let technology disrupt the workplace. So what I mean by this is that you may find a baby boomer that has not had as much exposure to an EMR, that if you're looking for a baby boomer to work on marketing, they may not have had as much experience with the digital marketing campaign. They may not be as comfortable with certain software, especially if you're talking about a provider that hasn't had to really work within the technology versus a millennial who grew up with technology. Now, when I say the difference in letting this disrupt the workplace is, and we have all seen this, is these devices. Now, pick a brand, right? Whatever.
I even have one.
Whatever brand, we just happen to prefer a certain brand here in our crew, but whatever the brands might be, is that they tend to disrupt. And by disrupt, I don't necessarily mean that in a good or positive way, is that we have all found instances where a millennial generation, they're more used to being connected at all times, right? Who is texting me? Who is calling me? I'm receiving push notifications from my social media channel of choice. And so that tends to be more disruptive. The millennial generation tends to be the one that is sneaking glances at a smartphone or a smart device in the hallway in between seeing patients, versus baby boomers. This doesn't tend to be a baby boomer habit. Baby boomers don't have the same need to feel connected constantly that a millennial generation does. We encourage you, and we're going to discuss this in a few slides, but make sure you're addressing this right from the start. So, Jay, what would you say when we talk about the technology differences and comfort levels between baby boomers and millennials?
Well, there have been so many technological enhancements that have come along the way. Like you said, Mara, when we first started, the only cell phone that was available was in your car. And that was that big box in the trunk
And a zipper?
with the big, yeah. Well, no, that was actually technology advancement, because that was the one that was not permanently attached. The one with the zipper was the one you plugged into your lighter. All right. So you could take it from place to place with the big antenna or the licking stick on the windshield. Then we came to flip phones, and then we came, to the advancement of the Samsung and the Apple, or what other technology from the iOS devices, et cetera. Then we came from different types of EMRs and EHRs. And yes, we have learned to embrace it as baby boomers out of default, honestly, because there really was no choice. If you wanted to advance, and quite frankly, dentistry has been far more advanced than any other specialty when it came time for technology. I remember the old x-rays with the actual film to digital x-ray and putting them in where everything is advanced. And as the patient sits in the seat, and you can do 3D panoramic, and, then you come back and you view it right on the screen. And they didn't have this type of technology. I remember as it came along, each time it was pretty disruptive, because anyone that has ever changed an EMR, EHR, all says the same thing. Oh my goodness, it's hateful. Not only learning it, but learning the fields. Every time I went from Windows 3 to, to Millennium and to whatever, to 7 and to 10 and whatever comes next, or Word and all of these, where's those buttons? All right. Well, they used to be up here on the toolbar. Now they're not here anymore. So we have learned to embrace it. But as the younger generation grows up with it, I always say, what a genius I may have been if I had exposure to technology growing up that the younger people have today.
But now, as you're adding to your team, this is the time to start nixing these issues. And so, really, as you continue to look at adding to your team and you continue to look at tweaking your team, so inside your practice, and I always like to refer, Jane, I always like to refer to staff as a team. We say that internally with our own team members as well, that because everybody really works together as a team. So, this is the time that we want to start paying attention to how to nix some of these issues. And I say that it starts during recruitment. Okay. And we do, Jay, I've lost track of how many interviews we have done for our clients. And even in the past few weeks alone, one of the questions that we get again and again from people that come to us, from practices that come to us are, is now a good time to hire because of COVID, especially? Is now still a good time to hire? And is this still a good time to open a practice? And the answer is yes, absolutely, on both sides. So when we look at opening a practice, just like Jay said earlier, is that we still have clients coming to us on a weekly basis and prospects coming up on a weekly basis. This is a great time because the need is still out there. And when we look at recruitment, because we help people all over the country really recruit new team members, what we have found with COVID, and I think this takes a moment to really address especially, is that there was an incredible, unfortunate round of people that were laid off, I would say in Q2, right, of this year. So there were an incredible amount of people that were laid off. And what that actually did for the job market was open up this incredible pool of candidates that otherwise would not have been searching for jobs. So we're looking at loyal team members because they might have been with their previous practice for 5, 10, 15 years and they loved their practice, but unfortunately their practice could no longer support their position. Skilled candidates. So you're talking about these people can really have the pick of who they want to work for. And so when we're looking at recruitment, now is the time to go in and really start recruiting. So when we kick off this recruitment, we want to make what you're looking for with any generation clear from the very start, right? So make your expectations clear from the very start. So number one, create that job description. And Jay, can you talk about some of the different ways that you address experience and the need for a certain amount of experience for a certain position? Because there are times that a practice may be looking for a millennial, or they might be looking specifically for a boomer, a baby boomer that has this incredible amount of experience. So can you talk about crafting job descriptions and the ways that somebody is able to craft verbiage in order to state who they're looking for and what they're looking for?
Sure. I think it even goes before the job description because it goes in recruitment, as you're saying, and the recruitment phase starts, when you have to determine what position is it that you're actually looking for.
Right.
Now, is it a dental assistant? Is it, first of all, let's start, is it the director of first impressions, that person that is either answering your phone, or is that person that is the first person that your prospective patient or patient sees when they walk into the door prior to going into the reception area? So, what are you looking for? Now, you can't necessarily, there are things that you're not allowed to say in the recruitment phase, and that's where we come in and we help you with that. But, when you're posting, you want to post for the right position. And what is it in that need? So, in the job description, as Mara was just alluding to, you want to make sure that your description is clear, it's concise, and it's consistent throughout the job description. Now, let me share with you why. Because, and we'll get to this in a minute, but even after this person is hired, as we go through all the phases of the recruitment stages to the hiring and training and retention stage, there's going to get up to a point where you're going to do an evaluation. And you always want to make sure that you're able to evaluate somebody by their objectives that you've set down from the very beginning in their job description. Because how would you ever hold me accountable for something that I didn't know I was actually responsible for? So when you're doing that hiring, what you want to do is put down what is that job description from the moment that that person walks in the door, putting the key in the door to opening up the practice, making sure that in the old days, when those magazines used to be on the table, and I hope they never will be again, and that's for a COVID reason, and those nasty magazines that people lick their tongues and they swipe the pages, and it's like, I think about it today and I cringe. I don't even want to touch it. But that job description explains to the person, what type of experience you're looking for, what type of educational process you're looking for. You certainly don't want to hire a hygienist. You certainly don't want to hire a dental assistant or an oral maxillofacial, the surgical assistant that doesn't have any experience. And now when we're talking about experience, there are levels, and I mean levels of experience. And what one person might think is a lot, we might, or you might think it doesn't fit your practice.
Which honestly, Jay brings up a really good point that you want to, when you're crafting job descriptions, put down, just like you were mentioning, put down minimum 5 years experience to apply, must have these certifications, minimum 10 years experience with XYZ. And if that is, or if you are looking for a new graduates welcome. So in other words, and be very, very clear on that what that number looks like as far as the number of years of experience or the type of certification that you're looking for.
Look, if you're willing to train, then that's up to you. But understand that the more training that is required, the less is the financial remuneration. All right. Mm-hmm. Because as a seasoned oral maxillofacial surgical practice, you really are not looking for somebody that doesn't know what an aspirator or suction is. You don't want to have somebody that has never done tooth extraction versus general dentistry. And there's all levels. It's like in the aesthetic cosmetic world, there are estheticians and there are paramedical estheticians. Somebody's an esthetician that comes from a general day spa that does eyelash extensions and eyebrows. And microplaning, dermaplaning is different than somebody that does extensive esthetician work. Mm-hmm. In your field, you're doing surgery. All right. You may even be doing facial surgery. And you're doing extractions for wisdom teeth. You're actually doing implants as oral maxillofacials, implantology. You may be doing even more specialized things. I know oral maxillofacial surgeons that are doing facelifts and rhinoplasties. So you really, in your job description, you want to define what it is for what you're looking for. And if you're going to train, have a clear, concise, and consistent, defined training program. Because one thing I can assure you, you're probably not going to be able to have the time, if you're a busy practice, to personally do it yourself. And maybe have some of your staff that are able to assist you in doing it. What type of education are you looking for? Are you looking for somebody? Hey, look, I have no problems with taking somebody that has worked for a seasoned oral maxillofacial surgeon for 10, 15, 20 years versus somebody that's come out of a formal training program that's brand new. I would take that older, well-seasoned and mature person. And I put that, who do you want flying your jet? I want Captain Sully. All right. I want the gentleman or somebody who looks like this that has flown a million hours and knows what to do in the event. Now, I have nothing against the young people, by the way, because they are our future. However, when you're looking to hire somebody, you want somebody that's going to be able to hit the road running, because when you hire a warm body, I promise you, you're always going to be taking the heat.
Yeah, this actually falls in really well with the next component that you see, which is to clarify company culture. We have several people in several clients that didn't go through the proper vetting process, if you will, and they hired a warm body because they said, we need somebody now, we need somebody right now. And so that they didn't take the time to vet for experience, they didn't take the time to vet for company culture, to make sure that this person was a fit with the company culture that they have specifically within their practice. The person was, and this happened just 2 weeks ago, that they made it happen just like this. And so the person started on Monday and quit by Wednesday afternoon. And here we are having to go through the process all over again. When we talk about company culture, there are very specific things that I want you to think about what the company culture looks like in your practice. And some of them are more generation specific and some of them are not. So, for example, do you have a practice that relies very heavily on technology, where everything from your EMR to your headset to is everybody on a touch screen device? Every single thing is controlled in the cloud. Do you have a very, very tech heavy practice, or are you still on paper chart? We've seen that too at this point. So think about, do you have a tech heavy practice or not? And so hiring somebody that has an incredible knowledge when it comes, and in comfort level, really comfort level with technology is important. Are you very reliant? How do you get leads? How do you get new patients? If this is a position that you're hiring for when it comes to marketing or as a coordinator, an outreach coordinator, do you rely heavily on social media and on review sites? Or does your position still have one that picks up the phone, calls other practices, really seeks out referrals? And so you want somebody that is that go-getter that will pick up the phone, or as COVID allows, go into practices and is that road warrior that they're going to be out in your community 3 days a week. You want to think about, how does your practice function as a team? Does everybody really pull together to help each other out? So you need somebody that is very, very team oriented, or do you want somebody that's a self-starter that really they do well as an island and they focus well, just they do their job, heads down, focus on that. And these are things that you need to ask, questions you need to ask in the interview process as far as the company culture component.
In that interviewing addressing, I am always the type of a person, and we continue to do several interviews a week for our clients throughout the country. But I'm a former practice owner, and the one thing I can say, people have differed with me and disagreed with me, but when Mara shared that we had a person for a client of ours that lasted 2 days, I almost blame the practice why this happened. And I'll share with you why. That at least beat the one nightmare story that I had, that a new employee that I interviewed came in, and on the first day, she asked if she could go to lunch early because she had not had breakfast, and I was very obliging to it, and she never came back. I blame myself for that.
Gee, she's still eating breakfast. Give her a break. This was 5 years ago, but it was a really long brunch.
Yeah, but here's why I blame myself. I don't believe in painting the rosiest picture, and many of you do, because you want that candidate so badly and you want them to start, and you may have gotten them to agree at a lower salary, entry salary level. And you're thinking, wow, I now have the ability to have somebody and save some money on their salary. But when you pay peanuts, many times and more often, you get monkeys. And the reason I say this is because you have to paint the picture of how tough your practice can be. All of the things that the client or your prospective employee has to do, it's not a cakewalk. And if they have that understanding ahead of time, then they know coming in, most of the times, anything other than what you've explained to them is a cakewalk. It's easier. Versus when this person that came in and only lasted 2 days, their answer was, it's too much for me. And why? Because they were not painted a picture that the phone rings and it rings 3 times while you're already on the phone. And you may see 75 to 100 patients in a day with 4 and 5 providers. And sometimes you may have to work through your lunch. I'm not saying that this is an everyday thing, but
Right.
you don't get your lunch from 12 to 12:30 or 12:30 to 1. Maybe one day it has to go from 1:30 to 2 because it got so busy. And I know you all never run late, right?
Never.
Well, I have to tell you, of all the specialties out there, of those who do not run late, it's dental. They run late the least because they're not seeing 10 and 15 patients all at the same time and seeing 3 patients back to back in multiple rooms with a single provider,
Mm-hmm.
right? They really do delegate themselves to their entire patient base one at a time, more so than others who might see 3 every 15 minutes. So don't have unrealistic expectations, all right? And find out how they address drama in different parts of the workplace, because many times when somebody is looking for a job, they're not really always going to be honest with you. Everyone tells us they are the drama less person, yet they may be the person that creates the drama. And I know we have those long-term candidates plans. A smart interviewer will tell you they want to retire with you. When somebody who's 21 and 22 years old and tells me that they want to retire with me, I don't know that I feel that comfortable with them, because then it may tell me they have no goals and aspirations, versus somebody that asks me, is there any room for advancement in your practice?
And Jay, I think you would probably agree that reviewing a resume is going to give you a really good indication of what somebody's goals are. Because if I look and I see that somebody is a job hopper and they've been somewhere else every 8 months, 14 months, 12 months, 13 months, 6 months, and they keep job hopping, then what I will see is that they don't have plans to stay with my practice either. Because why would they? They haven't had plans to stay with anybody's practice. So I
Well, that
think,
is true. However, um, it depends on what they stayed a short term for and where they went to.
sure.
Because if they were offered an opportunity and they were the front desk director of First Impressions, and then they
Mhm.
went to a dental or medical assistant, and then they went on to dental technology school part time or however that works, and then they did get a different job, and then they went on to be an assistant manager or an office manager every year or what after. I also look at, some of you may be in military areas, all right, in Arizona, in the Tampa area, in
Mhm.
the New Mexico area, okay? And were you a military spouse, all right? So that you had to move all the time, and now your spouse, he or she may have retired or been discharged. And therefore, I don't always hold that. There's always reasons why people do move around.
Sure.
And especially doctors, ladies and gentlemen, please understand that you're going to see a lot more furlough and layoff in future resumes than we ever have, through
I
no
agree.
fault of their own. I've seen
Hmm.
a lot of practices slow down. I've seen a lot of practices close because those experienced doctors and practice owners said, you know what? I really don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm selling out to the big groups where I will work for them, let them own the business, let them manage the staff. I don't want to deal with it anymore, because if COVID comes around, I can always be a provider and not have to worry about being the business owner.
Sure. Sure. I think that that's where, it's all about being very aware and being sensitive during this particular time. And really, as we look at the interview process, there are certain additional things that we want to make sure, like we talked about some of these already, but to make sure that we ask. So pay special attention to things like typos and lack of attention to detail, no matter which generation, in both the resume and the cover letter. If there are typos throughout their resume and throughout their cover letter, there's going to be typos in the chart. It could mean that when they're entering the patient's name into your system, that there's going to be typos in that. There could be typos with email addresses, and that means that emails, patient confirmations, appointment confirmations are never going to get to that patient, which is going to increase your rate of no-shows. So it's all about keeping in mind these things that seem very small during the interview process, but are going to make a big difference in the long term. And this really goes for both generations. But I encourage you during the interview process, ask about your candidate's comfort level with technology, whether you have a practice that is heavily reliant on technology or not, because it could go both ways. If you have a practice that is very heavily reliant on technology, ask about specific components of technology. Ask about Microsoft Office. How comfortable are you with Excel? How often do you check your email? What are some of your favorite apps on your phone? What kind of smartphone do you have? Are you more of a Mac or a PC user? Ask about these things. And one thing you want to make sure is that if you have a practice that is more baby boomer heavy and maybe isn't as full of technology, and then you bring in a millennial, how is that millennial going to do in a practice that is not as tech heavy and tech savvy? And is that millennial going to be more frustrated and possibly leave quicker? Versus, do you have a plan to upgrade to additional technology, or where do you plan to stay? So that's why I always ask. Now, when I say don't make assumptions about age, then I want you to think about this, is that we have certain candidates we have interviewed who are my age or in their late 20s that really are not tech savvy at all. My grandmother, who was absolutely glorious, my Bubby, we jokingly called her iPhone Bubby because in her mid to late 80s, this woman loved her iPhone. She loved YouTube. She loved FaceTime with all of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She loved Skype. So I think you don't ever want to make those assumptions. Now, I'm not saying that you want someone who's almost 90 in your practice, but we just want to keep these things in mind, not to be too focused on only the person's age. So we do always want to make sure that we're asking these questions specifically. Now, new hires. So we're talking about, you have found this glorious dream candidate and you are excited to have them in your practice. So what I always encourage is that in the very beginning, you ask new hires what their goals are. What are their goals in the next 90 days, and help them set those goals 6 months, 1 year, and then down the line. I think that to ask any more than 1 to 2 years in advance is a little bit, it's just a little maybe too forward thinking, but ask them what their goals are in the future. Do they have goals to open their own practice if they are a provider, for instance? Are you looking to add additional providers? Are they somebody who is maybe a dental hygienist and they have a plan to go on and go to additional schooling later on? Are they doing this just for now? And really they want to go run their own taco truck one day because that is their dream, and they're looking for something just to pay the bills at this point, and they're only with you just as a job.
Well, that's very important, because you may, depending upon where you are in the country, have a dental assistant.
Yes.
And that dental assistant, and I will share this with you, that this happens to me personally. I'm here based in South Florida, and I know in Texas, and I know in New Mexico, and I know in Arizona and California. And the reason I use a lot of border states, is that we get a lot of USFMGs, the US foreign medical graduates, and they are dentists in foreign countries. They may be doctors in foreign countries and they have not done a residency. So they come over to the United States. They are licensed practitioners in their country, but they are not allowed to practice the scope that they've been trained in. So they may be looking to get a residency. And here you are. I do know that in my general dental practice, and I know in my oral maxillofacial surgeon's practice, they use dental assistants. As a matter of fact, the dental assistant, the surgical assistant that, actually um, starts IVs and doesn't, the doctor is the one that puts the patient to sleep, but that is a dentist in another country. So you may want to understand what is their goal and aspiration. If you're looking for somebody that has experience, that is willing to work with you for 1 or 2 years, or better yet, that they'll want to go and get that residency, go to dental school, and then maybe come back to work with you again.
Mm-hmm.
Find this out from the very beginning. All right. Somebody that's had many, many years as a hygienist, and that's what they want to do. I know many hygienists that were also dentists in foreign countries. So figure it out. I would much rather have that experienced person that knows both sides of it. The reason for that is they're going to be able to spot things for you as professionals, all right, that you may not primarily see. You'll spot it when you see the patient, but usually when a hygienist, they do their thing and then they do the exam before the dentist comes in or the surgeon comes in, right? But they're able to spot things for you first. So their goals and aspirations are, do they want to stay with you for 1 or 2 years? That may be okay for you,
Right.
but don't you want to know that going in?
And by finding out what their goals are, that is going to help you to create the job atmosphere and to create not just the job description, but the duties and their roles and responsibilities that can help support that so that they can best support you. And a happy employee is going to stay longer with your practice. And these are things we want to think about. And you want to find out because someone of a baby boomer age has a much different 5 to 10 year plan than a millennial will have. We talked about that in the beginning, is that the responsibilities may or may not be different, but the long-term goals may or may not be different. So we want to ask everybody right from the beginning what it is that they're looking for. Now, there's additional things we want to make clear right from the beginning when we have this new person come in.
You know what the major
So,
difference is in their end goals, Mara?
hmm,
That a millennial wants to work for 10 or 15 more years. A baby boomer wants to live another 10 or 15 years.
Jay. Well, I hope for my sake and for yours, you have a lot longer than that. I plan on keeping you around a lot longer than that.
That was a joke.
Right. So, what we want to keep in mind, and the reason that we bring up employee happiness and really so much about keeping in communication with the employees and focusing on employee goals, are that Indeed.com, which is one of the leading, as you all know, one of the leading job recruitment sites. We have nothing to do with Indeed.com other than they have become kind of our go-to when we're hiring. But they did a study, and what they found is that 71% of the labor force at this point is either actively seeking or open to a new position. And those percentages increase with millennials. Millennials are more likely to be headhunted away from their current practice and more likely to say, you know what, I could give or take where I'm currently working. So I'm just going to keep an eye on what's out there right now, just in case something comes along. And so that's a reason that we want to make sure we're looking at how to keep employees in the practice so that we can decrease turnover, and how to really keep employees happy. So, and this is something that previously it wasn't something we thought about in previous generations of, oh, let's make sure employees were happy. Previous generations, it was you come in, you do your job, and you should be grateful that you have a job. And the mindset truly has shifted at this point. And there's so much more of a focus on employee well-being, employee happiness than there was before. So we want to make sure you're identifying the issues in your practice. So in other words, when an employee does leave, you want to make sure you, number one, find out why did they leave? Was there drama between that employee and another employee? Do you see a pattern where this is the third employee that's left because of drama with one particular person? Because if so, look at the pattern that has created. We say that drama will metastasize like a cancer and it will spread. And you want to make sure you keep that drama from metastasizing in your practice. So that is really making it clear how to make sure that this doesn't continue to be an issue.
Read between the lines, because you never really get the truth, because the person that talks about the drama may have been the person creating the drama.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at this young lady and I say, what a shame that she needs Botox at such a young age, from being so upset.
Hey, sometimes we need Botox at a young age, okay? Sometimes that's just what's necessary. But you also want to look at other components. So things that we hear again and again as far as why employees are unhappy. So often practices think that, it's a matter of pay. And so they think, oh, well, how either one of two things, either I'll pay more and then I can get better people, or let me see how low I can get away with paying somebody because they said that they needed $16 an hour. So I'm going to give them $16.25 an hour for the position. Let me see how low can I possibly go. And while we always really encourage you to watch your budget in your practice, you want to make sure that you keep in mind you get what you pay for. And so making sure you're able to keep good people in your practice. Another component that we see is that, oh, well, because I would sooner pay them more, but I'm going to give employees less paid time off, or I'm not going to give them a flexible schedule. I'm not going to allow my marketing person to work from home. I'm not going to give an additional floating holiday because the holidays we have on our practice don't necessarily work with different races, different religions, different things like that, right? So we want to keep in mind some of the bonuses that come with having a practice is that you're able to look at how to keep good people so that you can keep the same mistakes from happening again and again and again, and looking at how to keep your people, because those intangibles are truly more and more important to millennials than they were to baby boomers. Baby boomers, it was put in my time. What's important to millennials? Millennials, like we talked about work-life balance, but they want to be treated with respect. And you can't yell and name call. Millennials won't put up with this lack of respect towards them. I call them the nasty gram emails that are sent sometimes from practice owners at midnight are not going to fly with millennials. They're more sensitive as a whole. They take things to heart more. So that's where you want to make sure you're looking at all of these components versus a baby boomer might have said, well, that's just how a boss speaks to an employee. You got to just take it. This has been happening forever. This is just what it is. Self-care, right? So if you were to talk to millennials versus you were to talk to a baby boomer, if I were to say, Jay, this is what the practice can afford, but they're also going to offer mindfulness meditation and workplace wellness, Jay might say, that's great, but show me the money. It's a very boomer mentality versus somebody of a more millennial mindset tends to think more in terms of those intangibles as well. So you want to make sure as you are looking to blend the two together, look at what each generation is truly going to find valuable as far as the benefits in that particular office. And honestly, when you have a practice that has a overall happier, healthier environment, and we know that in some ways the health factor, i.e. COVID, is not something that you're able to control as much as we would like. So I'm not talking about, when I say healthier environment, I'm not talking about fewer colds. Everybody should be following the CDC guidelines when it comes to controlling COVID as best as possible. So that's not what I say when I mean healthier, but a healthier mindset, healthier attitude, and really less drama and less sparring between the two generations. Less is going to result in less absenteeism and truly a more positive work environment. So again, finally, we want to remember that so much relies on the individual and not just the generation. So we want to make sure we're focusing on individuals, but knowing that some of these do tend to be true for generations. Jay, did you have any final thoughts as we wrap up our presentation?
I do. We have 4 minutes. I would like to share that although I always say the keys to success and financial success in a practice are really two ways: increase revenue, reduce expense. When you increase revenue, you may get 30, 40 cents if you're lucky as pure net operating profit and margin dollars. When you reduce an expense, it is a 100% margin dollar net profit, dollar to dollar for what you save. However, I did start this off by saying that the most important resource in our practice and in our business is the human resource.
Mm-hmm.
And it is important to ensure that you pay them fairly and justly, because it's never worth trying to recruit an additional or another replacement employee when you're willing to pay more money for that replacement person that has experience than the person that asked you for a little bit more money and is going to leave you, possibly go to your competitor for that same amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And why would you not want to pay that person, even if it's a little bit more than you want, when they're fully trained, indoctrinated into your practice? And it costs approximately 25% of an annual salary when you first hire and train somebody, because they're really not set to go on their own for approximately 3 months, according to MGMA, and that's 25% of their salary. So, folks, in closing, I really want you to think about the human resource in your practice: millennials, baby boomers. It is a family. We want to keep people, in our practice. Working with a millennial and a baby boomer is one big happy family. I leave you with thanking you for allowing Mara and I with the opportunity to share this hour with you. We are available to help you, to assist you in any way we can to increase the health, the flexibility of your practice. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, we are absolutely here. We know this is a difficult time, so we are here for you.